this is CAT 2024 DLR, third slot, fourth set question. So look at the past CAT papers, helps you to understand how the questions are as such. So 10 countries they're given data. Country 9 has the highest GDP and country 10 has the highest GDP per capita. And GDP per capita is the GDP of a country divided by population, that's mentioned. So they only given data in a table for country 1 to 8, but 9 and 10 has the highest GDP per capita. And they have given everything with respect to country 9 and 10, so which is mentioned out there. So column 1 gives the country's identity, yes. Column 2 gives the country's GDP as a fraction of GDP of country 9. They have not given GDP of country 9. I can take GDP of country 9 as 1, let's say. Which means country 1 will have a GDP of 0.5, country 2 will have a GDP of 0.14 and so on. I can take this number as GDP. Say my country 3 gives a GDP per capita as a fraction of GDP per capita of 10. So I'll take GDP per capita of 10 as 1. So in which this will give you GDP per capita of different countries. So 0.41 is the GDP of country 1 per capita, 0.25 is GDP of country 2 and so on. Instead of taking variables, taking numbers becomes faster and easier, because variables you need to keep on writing, forming equation takes a longer time. But using numbers, it tends to be faster. Yes, but there are some cases very rare where you cannot use numbers, you have to use variables. But in these cases, when you're comparing, you can always use numbers and solve. Column 4 gives you GDP's growth rate, column 5 annual population growth rate, which is mentioned out there. Okay, and assume the GDP population growth rate remains next 3 years. Okay, then let's start solving. Which one among the countries 1 to 8 has smallest population? Where is population given? The only place population is given is here, GDP per capita, GDP per population. Now if you notice, if I divide GDP by GDP upon per population, will give you GDP will get cancelled, get population. That means if I want population, I have to divide GDP divided by GDP per population. So it means I divide the second column and the third column, then I get the population. So we look at country 3 will be 0.13 upon 0.02. 0.13 upon 0.02, that is population. Country 5, if I look at 0.1 upon 0.36, 0.1 upon 0.36. Country 8, 0.07 upon 0.41. And country 7, 0.08 upon 0.3. I want for minimum, okay, smallest, I want numerator small, denominator big, which is there for country 8. Country 8 has the minimum numerator and maximum denominator. I can directly mark that as the answer. So not a very difficult thing, as long as I know how to solve it, it becomes easier. No calculation required, no need of looking calculator. Minimum numerator, maximum denominator, country 8, you can directly mark as the answer. The ratio of countries 4 GDP to countries 5 GDP in 2026. So GDP in 2024 is given as country 4 to country 5 is 0.12 upon 0.1, which if you look at is 1.2. Now if you look at countries 4 GDP, okay, is growth rate is 0.5%. Normally if the percentage is very small, less than 5%, you can just add it up. It doesn't make a big difference. So if I'm going from 24 to 26, 2 years, it will maximum change by 1%, around 1%, not more than that. 0.5 plus 0.5 will give you 1%, approximation. Approximation helps because the options are a little far. So there will be a 1% change for country 4, okay, and there's a growth, so into 1.01, 1% increase. If you look at country 5, 0.7 into 0.7 is 1.014% change. So you can use calculate. I'm approximating it. If you want to calculate accurately, you will have to multiply by actually 1.005 into 1.005, and denominator will be 1.007 into 1.007. Actually, I can directly mark because the denominator percentage more increases more than the numerator percent. The value will go down to below 1.2 because 0.12 upon 0.1 is 1.2, and because denominator is increasing more than numerator, it will go below. So I know 0.1314 is not possible. And the increase and decrease is very small, hardly 1%. So if I reduce 1.2 by 1%, it will hardly be anything. 1.1 19 something will be. You can directly mark the answer as 4 if you understand approximation. If you not, you can calculate this and then go about it. I'm using the calci and calculating. So you have 1.2, which is already into 1.01 and divide by 1.014. You get 1.1952. This will get as 1.1952. So basically you get the fourth option as the answer. Know how to approximate. In percentage, one way to approximate is when the values are less than 5% growth. Okay, you can always add and subtract. Instead of multiplying that 1.005 and 1.005, you can add that 5.5 as 1% and directly multiply by 1.01. The value may not be different. Unless the options are very, very close, like 1.194 and 1.195, then you need to worry about. Right now the options are far. Which one among the countries 1457 will have the largest population in 2027? Now first find the population in 2024. So again we do the same thing. If you look at country 4, okay, the population will be 0.12 upon 0.38. Right. Then if I look at country 7, population will be 0.08 upon 0.3. Country 1, population will be 0.15 upon 0.41. Right. And country 5, the population will be 0.1 upon 0.36. Right. So you're basically looking at it, finding the ratios and finding out where the population is there, and then accordingly then calculating. Calculate for each of them. You should be able to make out that technically 3 has the highest numerator. The denominators are almost same. I mean 7 I can ignore because numerator is very, very small. I can ignore it. But denominator for remaining 3 almost same because numerator there is a change of 50%. 0.12, 0.15 is 50% change. 0.12 to 0.15 is 25% change. But 0.38 to 0.41 is hardly any change. If you don't understand this, then calculate this first of all. If I calculate each of them, I'll just calculate 0.12 divided by 0.38. You will realize that it's 0.3157. I'll take 3157. I'm taking the 4 digits first. If I take 0.08 divided by 0.3, you get 2666. Then if I look at 0.15 into divide by 0.15 divided by 0.41, you will get 3658. And you realize that 0.1 divided by 0.36 will give you 277. So you can make out that country 1 in 2024 has the highest population. Okay. Now, if you look at country 1, the change in population is hardly 0.12%. So for 3 years, hardly 0.36% decrease. 0.36% decrease. I mean, 1% decrease will be decrease the population by 36 out of 3,600. If I'm assuming 3658, 1% decrease will be 36. This is 0.36% decrease. So it will hardly decrease by around 12 or 13. So this will still remain 3,600 and something. Whereas country 4, the population increased by 0.49. So 3 years will increase by 1.5%. 1% will be around 31 increase. 2% will be 62 increase. It will still not go to 3,600. You can straight away directly mark the answers to it. If you want to calculate the exact population, is actually 3658 into 0.12% decrease. Matlab 1 minus 0.0012 cube 3 times. Same you have to calculate, but this is tedious calculations. If you know approximation, this becomes easier to solve. You don't have to calculate each and every value, especially because the options are far. And a small percentage change doesn't make a big difference. As I said, you can add smaller percentage, you can directly add. So 0.1 to 0.1 to 0.1 will be 0.36% to 3658. 0.1 minus 0.0036 should give you same value, hardly any difference. You can calculate and check out. You can be comfortable. Okay, so how many countries among 1 to 8 will have GDP per capita in 2007 lower than in 2004? So GDP per capita to be lower, so population should increase by more than GDP. Population should increase by more than GDP. So if you look at everywhere, GDP is growing more than population everywhere. Even this is closest, but here also GDP is growing more than population, country 4. Everywhere GDP is growing more than population. So none of the countries, so 0 will be the answer. Okay, so none of the countries where population is growing more than GDP, so 0. Right? It's not very difficult. If you understand numbers, if you understand approximation, it becomes easier to solve these questions. The key is to be comfortable with numbers and comfortable with approximation. You can do it faster. Use Calci whenever required. Thank you.